Hi guys. So what I wanted to do today was just go over some of the questions from your pretest so you guys can know anything that you missed, see why, and kind of review some of this Algebra 1 stuff. So these questions are probably going to go in a different order than what you've seen because they were on kind of a shuffled order, but you're still going to see the same questions that you saw in your pretest. Alright, so this first one on here, you were supposed to write the equation of the line in point-slope form, and I'll tell you right now, that's why the majority of you guys missed it. A lot of you guys had this equation correct in slope-intercept form, but point-slope form is something different. So point-slope form, if you don't remember, is y minus y1 equals mx minus x1, where x1 and y1 are points on the graph. M is the slope. So a lot of you got the slope correct. Rise over run, it is negative because it's dropping. We'll find two kind of pretty points here. So this has a rise of 3 and a run of 2. So that slope is a negative 3 over 2. Then in order to write this in point slope form, there's a couple ways you could write it. Most of you who got it right used this point up here at the top. So you did y minus 1 equals negative 3 over 2 x plus 2. So that's one possible way to have written this. You could have used any point on this graph. You could have used those fraction points. A couple others did this bottom point down here. So you did y plus 2 equals negative 3 over 2 x. Or you did x minus 0, either way. So again, on this one, it's really just the notation that a lot of you missed. Some of you missed the negative on the slope. So do be careful about that. This does have a negative slope on it. All right, looking at the next one. So we're doing domain and range. Now, hopefully, now that we've reviewed domain and range, this one's a little bit easier. But this is also using inequality notation, whereas the new content, we used interval notation. So this is going to be an or equal to on both the domain and the range at the bottom because it has a closed circle. And then up at the top, that's going to be just the not or equal to because it's an open circle. So the domain in inequality notation would be 2 is less than or equal to x is less than 8. And your range would be 3 is less than or equal to y is less than 12. And answer choice that matches that one would be this one down here. All right, so next question. Factoring. So this one was missed a lot. Some of you guys actually went an extra step and you not only factored, you actually solved. Now be careful. Technically you can't solve this because it's not equal to 0. So a lot of you guys that did that extra step, it actually doesn't work because it's not really an equation. But it's good because we will be doing that this year. Now factoring is when you're trying to get those sets of parentheses that if you were to multiply it out would give you the same equation. So there's a lot of different methods to factor. The method that I'm going to use this year and the method that most of you used when you solved this is you started by multiplying a times c. And then you found two numbers that multiplied to negative 12 and add to the middle number. So in this case, my two numbers that multiply to negative 12 and add to negative 4 are a negative 6 and 2. Now those are not your answers. If this value is 1, like there's no number there, then yes, those can be involved in your answer. But when anytime that leading number is anything bigger than 1, we kind of have some extra steps to do. So this is the method that I'm going to use and that most of you used as well. What we do is we rewrite this problem and we split up this middle into the two new numbers we just came up with. So I'm going to rewrite this as minus 6x plus 2x minus 4. So it's still the same problem. I just use those two new numbers instead. Then what we do is grouping. So I look at these first two numbers and I take out what's common. Well, what's common between those two is 3x. If I factor out 3x, that leaves me with x minus 2. And think factoring out is like if I divided it from here. Then I look at the next two. Out of those next two, whatever sign is here, you keep it. So I'm going to keep that plus. The greatest common factor out of those two is the 2. If I divide out that 2, I'm left with x minus 2. Your parentheses should match. If your parentheses match, that's your first factor. Everything that's not in the parentheses is your second factor. And at this point, you stop because we're not solving, we're just factoring. Later on this year, though, we will factor and solve as well. So those of you guys who did that, that's great. You just don't really need to on this particular question. All right, so next question. Inequalities. So there were a few of you guys who kind of missed this one. So what we're doing on here, sorry, trying to make this to where you guys can see it all at once. So what we're trying to do here is match up the inequality symbol. So what we need to do first is figure out which of these is the blue line and which of these is the red line. So the red line has a negative slope and a y-intercept of 3. So the bottom one is the red line. The top one is the blue line. I know it's kind of hard to see that negative on there, but that is a negative x plus 3. So that is the red line. And then up here, this is the blue line. So both of these, the shading is above the line. If the shading is above the line, it's going to be greater than. The difference between these two lines, though, is the or equal to symbol. So the blue line is dotted, so that is just going to be greater, whereas the red line is solid, that's greater than or equal to. All right, next one. Now, hopefully, like I said, this was supposed to be non-calculator. This is a very easy question with a calculator, but this is the kind of stuff we need to be able to do very quickly without one. So the way this would work, first of all, is order of operations. We're going to start with what's inside the parentheses. In order to add those fractions together, I need to have a common denominator. Now, you guys really need to be comfortable using fractions, especially without a calculator, because that's going to keep coming back up in your future math classes, especially in pre-cal. In pre-cal, you're going to deal with something called radians, which is just all fractions. So again, don't use a calculator here and throughout the year. You've got to get the practice in without it. So in order to add these together, I need a common denominator. That common denominator is going to be 15. So in order to get a common denominator of 15, this left fraction gets multiplied by 3. This right fraction gets multiplied by 5. Now I can add those together, and I get 19 over 15. Now I have 19 over 15 divided by 1/2. Now remember, when you divide a fraction, you flip the second and multiply. So this becomes 19 over 15 times 2 over 1, which gives me my final answer of 38 over 15. All right, so solving for x. So this is one we couldn't factor on here, so this is one where you can use the quadratic formula. So to quadratic formula, x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. This is a, b, and c. So this would be x equals 2 plus or minus the square root of negative 2 squared minus 4 times 3 times negative 2, all over 2 times 3. So this is 2 plus or minus the square root of 4 plus 24, so 28. And then we got to be careful with simplifying. This is a mistake I saw a lot last year. First of all, when it comes to simplifying this, I cannot cancel out or simplify the 2 and the 6. Because I need to consider any value that's here. Currently, there is not a value there. So right now, in its current form, I can't simplify. The first thing I need to do is try and simplify the square root of 28, though. So the square root of 28 simplifies to 2 root 7. So again, think about a perfect square you can divide out. Some of you may have done the factor tree method, where you break this down until you get all your prime numbers. The pair goes on the outside. What's not a pair stays on the inside. So we simplify the square root of 28 into 2 root 7. Now we can simplify. And the way we simplify is we have to take the 2, and the 6 and divide all of those by the same number. Well, they're all divisible by 2. So this becomes 1 plus or minus 1 root 7 over 3, which is answer choice A. All right, next one, again, order of operations. So if you had a calculator, this would be pretty easy, but we're trying to do this without a calculator. So let me rewrite it a little bit larger. Okay, so parentheses first. So 6 plus 3 squared, that becomes 9 squared. In these parentheses, I would do the 10 divided by 5 first. So this is going to be 9 minus 2. So this becomes 81 plus 7, which is 88. All right, another domain and range question. Again, this is an inequality notation. You now have learned interval notation. But in inequality notation, the way I'd write this, domain left to right, this would be from -2 less than x less than 1. And then my range, my lowest point is -1. It touches it, so it's or equal to. The highest point is 4. It's an open circle. So that's what your answer should look like. And I can't scroll with that written on there. That is one of your later values. And I'm just now seeing that this tiny little number right there is not a -1. That tiny little number is a -4, which is why I'm not finding my answer choice. Sorry about that. That actually, I need to zoom in a little bit to make sure I can read that. That is a -4. So it should be -4 is less than or equal to y, which is less than 4. And there's your correct answer down there at the bottom. All right, so on this little question, I apologize. I know a lot of you were having issues trying to get this thing to move. It either just did one of these. Don't worry about that. We'll have another question and a warm-up where you can answer this more accurately. I apologize. All right, solving equations. Again, solving equations, it's one of those things we really just need you guys to kind of be comfortable with. So I'm going to rewrite this a little larger. We're going to do a lot of solving of equations this year. It's a big part of Algebra 2. All right, so a couple different ways you can do this. I'll go ahead and distribute on the left side. I think that's the easiest way to get started. I'll go ahead and combine those like terms over there on the right side. I'll get all of my x's on one side, so I'll add that 56x. And then I'm also going to add 16 to the other side. And I end up with my final answer. All right, a lot of this was probably actually the one that was most correct. Most of you guys are really good on this one. So vocab for a quadratic. We will graph quadratics again this year. So this first box here is pointing at this bottom part, which is the vertex. Over here on the side, that is the 0 or the root. Also the x-intercept. And then the y-intercept is that point right there. All right, on the next one, write the equation of a line in slope-intercept form. So that's the one a lot of you wanted to use on that other picture. Y equals mx plus b. So it gives me 2 points, -2, 7, and 4, -5. So the first thing I'm going to do is find the slope. Slope is the change in y's over the change in x's. So I'm going to do 7 minus -5 over -2 minus 4. So that becomes 12 over -6, which is a slope of -2. Now once you know the slope, in order to get it in slope-intercept form, honestly I would use point-slope form. I think that's the easiest way to get it. So point-slope form, y minus y1 equals m, x minus x1. So my point, you can use either one. I'll use the -2, 7. Y minus 7 equals -2, x plus 2. So we'll go ahead and distribute. Add the 7. And there's my equation. If the other way you could have done this, if you did y equals -2x plus b, you could plug in the x and the y and solve for b. That's another way that you could get your answer, and you'd get that b equals 3. Whichever method is easier for you, you end up with the same answer. All right, next one's also factoring, but this one's factoring is a little bit easier, hopefully, because all of these quadratics have an a value of 1. So I'm just going to go ahead and factor each of these independently. So when we're factoring, if this value is 1, these are way easier to factor. All we need are the numbers that multiply to 18 and add to 11. So the numbers that multiply to 18 and add to 11 are 9 and 2. So this would be x plus 9 and x plus 2. All right, the next one, x squared plus 2x minus 24. What multiplies to a -24 and adds to 2? So that is going to be x plus 6 and x minus 4. Next one, x squared minus x minus 56. Again, multiplies to negative 56 and adds to negative 1. So x minus 8 and x plus 7. And then the last one multiplies to a positive 6 and adds to a negative 5. Now be careful on this one. So this is going to be x minus 3 and x minus 2. So again, when a is 1, when this leading coefficient is 1, it's going to be way easier to be able to find those factors. If a is not 1, we've got a lot of extra work to do with splitting up the middle and doing our grouping. But again, we'll do a lot of factoring this year. All right, this next one, this is actually going to come up in our second day, or our third day. Second day of new content, third day of instruction. So it says f of x is x squared minus 2x plus 3. And I'm evaluating f of negative 2. F of negative 2 means you replace x with negative 2. So this becomes 4 plus 3, which is 11. All right, direct variation. So we'll do indirect variation later this year. That's when this will come back up. Direct variation is basically a line that goes through the origin, if you remember correctly. So what you have for direct variation is something along the lines of y equals kx, where k is some constant. So this is a proportional relationship. So one way you could solve this is you could solve for k. If y is negative 12, when x is 9, then you can get that k is equal to a negative 4/3. And then you can set this equation up to where y equals negative 4/3 times negative 4. And you can get that y equals 16/3. The other way you could do this, because it is a proportional relationship, is you could set up a proportion. So when x is 9, y is negative 12. And then when x is negative 4, then y is something we're trying to figure out. So I get that 48 is equal to 9y. So y is equal to 48/9, which simplifies to 16/3. Now on this, some of you guys had the right answer just in the wrong format, and that's why it got counted wrong. So just know it's a little bit sensitive on the formatting, so if you had it wrong technically, don't just know that if your answer is correct, you're doing it right. All right, rationalizing the denominator. So you might have done this in geometry for the first time, or maybe you did it before, but rationalizing the denominator means you get the square root out of the bottom. So the way we do that is we multiply the top and bottom by that square root. So on the top, that gives me 5 times the square root of 33. On the bottom, I just have 3. So that gives me my correct answer. Exponent rules. We're definitely going to use this second semester a lot. So second semester, you're going to be really comfortable with your exponent rules. So let me rewrite this so it's a little bit bigger. So when it comes to exponent rules, first of all, if you have a negative exponent, that's going to flip the side of the fraction that it's on. So y to the negative third is going to move to the bottom, and the exponent becomes positive when I move it to the bottom. The two at the bottom that have negative exponents, I can move to the top and make positive exponents. Then from this point, I can follow my other exponent rules. When you multiply bases, you add the exponents. So I would add those two exponents together. That gives me x to the 10th. Then when you divide like bases, you subtract the exponents. The bigger one's on the bottom, so my answer is going to be at the bottom. So I would do 3 minus 2, which is just y. So x to the 10th over 6y is my correct answer. All right, write the equation of a vertical line that passes through this point. Vertical lines are x equals lines. There's a little acronym I used to teach my kids that I really like. It's HOI VUX. And what that stands for, HOI stands for horizontal, 0 slope, and y equals lines. VUX stands for vertical, undefined slope, and x equals lines. So this line here, since it wants the vertical line, it would be an x equals line. So it's x equals, and what x actually equals there is 1. All right, the solution to the system of equations, this hopefully was a super easy question for you. It gives you the graph. All you need to understand is what that means. The solution is the intersection. The intersection is 1, -1, or x equals 1, y equals -1. Our second unit is going to have a lot of systems in it. So there's my answer. All right, horizontal line, as we just said. So using that acronym HOI, horizontal lines are y equals lines. So y equals, what y actually equals is 14. All right, so solving the system. Again, like I said, our second unit is going to review this, and we'll look at some 3-variable systems as well in Algebra 2. So you can use whatever method you want. I'm going to use substitution because y is already solved for. So I'm going to plug this in. So this is -3x plus 27. So I'll add the 3x to the right side. I'll subtract the 2. So that's going to be 2.5, which I'm going to write as 5 over 2. So to get x by itself, I'm going to multiply both sides by 2/5. So I get that x equals 10. Once I know what x is, I can take it and plug it back into either equation. I'm going to plug it into the first one because that's the easiest. So I would get that y equals -10 plus 9, and y equals -1. So you should have those answers on there. All right, simplifying the square roots. So this was part of that quadratic formula question, the square root of 80. So you've got 2 different methods. One is think about what perfect square can I divide out. So perfect squares, 4, 9, 16, 25, etc., etc., etc. Figure out the biggest one of those that you can divide out of 80. Well, 16 can divide out of 80. So if you took 16 out, the square root of 16 is 4. 80 divided by 16, you are left with 5. If you don't like that method, the other option is you take 80 and you break it down into its prime factors. So 80 is the same thing as 4 times 20. 4 breaks down into 2 times 2. 20 breaks down into 4 times 5. And now what we do is we look at all of the bottom numbers. Out of those bottom numbers, we look for any pair. They don't have to be right next to each other. They are in this case. But as long as it's a number at the bottom, we can count it as a pair. 5 is left over. Any pair goes on the outside, and anything left over stays on the inside. So I end up with 4 root 5. All right, trying to find the error here. So looking at this one, it may be kind of hard to see. The error occurs right here. Because when you divide by a negative, you need to flip the sign. So when you divide by a negative, you flip the sign. So the error occurred when you did step 4. So dividing by a negative, you flip the inequality symbol. And we will do some inequalities this year, so make sure to remember that. All right, last one, solving the system again. This one is easiest to solve by elimination because it's set up perfectly for elimination. Because if I add these together, the y term eliminates. So I will have -2x equals 10. So x equals -5. Once you know what x is, plug it back into either equation. So -10 minus 3y equals 2. So -3y is equal to 12, and y is equal to -4. All right, so that is it for this Algebra 1 review. Again, we're going to do some review of each of these things kind of throughout the year, throughout warm-ups, and throughout some different things. So any of these things you still have questions on, feel free to jump into Zoom at any point and get some help on this. Set up some office hours if you need to as well.